Let us turn to now reform movement number 2. Reform movement number 2 I title, Making People Flexible, Changing the Curriculum. And what you're reading for this section is the founding document of reform movement number 2, written by the Assistant Director of the National Science Foundation, Joseph Bordogna, and a charismatic engineering leader, the Dean of Engineering from Drexel University, Eli Fromm, who organized a significant transformation in the structure of engineering education at Drexel, and a leader in engineering education reform more generally from the University of South Carolina, Edward Ernst. When I talk about this reform movement number 2 in class, I first ask students, especially students who've been around for a while, to list for me changes in your curricula. Think about what changes have taken place in your curricula while you've been undergraduate students. And it surprises me the extent to which changes have been taking place over the last 3 to 4 years. We're talking about the mid-1990s. For example, beginning in 1999, actually 1998 at Virginia Tech, students in electrical engineering and computer engineering do not have to take statics. I can't overemphasize the significance of that change, because statics has been viewed as the foundational course for all engineering education since the 19th century. Some classes in drawing classes are no longer having exams. A lot of requirements have been reclassified as technical electives. Students seem to be gaining more freedom to select courses, to somehow plot out their intellectual trajectories as undergraduate students. What is going on here? Well, Bordogna and company argue that we need to change our intellectual culture. They begin by outlining what they describe as a traditional focus on analysis, breaking things down and analyzing them. But it's time for a change. There is a growing need to influence academe, as they describe it, to educate students to see the world whole, to help them sense the coupling among seemingly disparate fields of endeavor, to teach synthesis in balance with analysis, and to enhance their capabilities to build connections between the world of learning and the world beyond. Notice right away a key dimension of the new reform movement number 2. It is calling attention to what happens between engineering education and life after engineering education. And the reforms involve a flow of insight, a flow of questioning, a flow of challenge from the outside to the inside. Quote, "As we approach the year 2000, our world grows both more exciting and more complex. Consider the increasingly sophisticated nature of work and relaxation, the growing interdependence of diverse cultures, the pervasive communication media that influence the way we think and act, the ascendance of disciplined, hard-working nations, the growing aspirations of less developed nations, and the concern for environmental fragility." Note in the end quote. Note in the language how they're calling attention to engineers' participation in a world, in a world that is growing increasingly complex. The argument is that traditional engineering training, especially as it occurs in the United States, is highly inflexible. It's training students to prepare themselves for specific jobs in specific arenas and then to stay. But the world out there is changing. During the late 1980s, corporations of the country have restructured themselves, as we described earlier, around production. And people who work on production need to be able to adjust themselves to changing production systems, changing production requirements, changing products. But discipline-based Engineering science-based training is producing relatively inflexible people. So what do we do? Quote, "The ability to make connections among seemingly disparate discoveries, events, and trends, and to integrate them in ways that benefit the world community will be the hallmark of modern leaders. They must be skilled at synthesis as well as analysis, and they must be technologically astute." Notice now the emphasis on bringing things together, on analyzing as a whole, on synthesis, on integration, on connectedness. Engineering science-based education focuses on analysis, analyzing a particular problem in terms of a particular theoretical viewpoint. How do we bring different pieces together? Now, in one sense, this image of integration, of thinking about the whole of problems, fits the traditional image of engineering problem solving, as involves drawing a boundary around the problem and abstracting it out, solving it in mathematical terms. What's unique here is that it's arguing that we must consider more dimensions, much more than has been included in the traditional technical engineering education. Does this call attention to any names we might have occurred earlier, might have encountered earlier in the course? Does the name Palczynski here jump out? Does the Soviet engineer's concept of humanitarian engineering relate, which was arguing that we needed to bring workers and people dimensions into problem solving? In a way, reform movement number 2 is asking for expanding what counts as the problem-solving activities of engineers.